Chapter 11. Alpine air bit at Megan Abbott's lips and nose, but it was her cheek that really stung. Fiery waves of pain resounded in the swelling flesh like the lingering toll of a bell. She lay where she had fallen, pressing the side of her face against the floor. The cold wooden boards acted like an ice pack to her throbbing cheek, but that was the only comfort the room offered. Megan whimpered, her throat scraped raw from screaming, her eyes puffy and still leaking tears. Chocolate-coloured hair wound around her small fingers as she tugged on her remaining ponytail, a nervous habit she had brought with her to Murkwater only a year before. God knows where the other ponytail was now, probably in Miss Turrell's wastepaper basket. It had been a fair trade. Callum had practically saved her life when he had captured the spider in her room. Big as her hand it had been, and she had screamed at him to kill it, but ridiculously he had taken it outside instead. Now it could come back in and threatened her again at any time. What an idiot. Regardless, Megan knew she owed Callum for that, but it had infuriated her the way he had kept giggling the whole time, as if her almost being eaten alive was something to laugh about. As such, she had decided not to repay the debt that she owed him, at least not just yet. It would serve him right. Secretly, though, she hoped that there would be another opportunity to call on him, another opportunity for him to win her favour. But when Amber had slid that damn rubber band onto Callum's wrist after the game that afternoon, Megan had seen the boy's face flush. Panic had gripped her, and she knew she had to do something drastic in order to hold his attention on her. Giving a piece of herself to Callum was a bit much, she knew, but she liked him. There was no point denying it. And how she wished he was here now to save her again. Megan had no illusions about her situation. It was something the older kids talked about frequently, usually in low whispers. Whether Miss Turrell understood exactly what she was doing when she dragged Megan upstairs was something Megan had no way of knowing. But how could Turrell not know after the number of times it had happened before? Still, Megan reassured herself, she was prepared for this. All the kids were in one way or another. She had her own way of fighting back, even if she wasn't exactly sure what she was fighting against. No more crying, she told herself miserably, and sat up, folding her legs under her. Wiping snot away from her nose, she slid her own rubber band out from under her sleeve where she'd been hiding it. It was an item that had not only cost her an entire stash of jam single serves, but also her prized Blue Moon marble. Megan had loved that marble, and had been fond of holding it up to her eye, viewing the world through its sapphire hue. The loss had made her sad at the time, but given her immediate situation, she now knew that it had been the right trade to make. She gave her wrist a quick snap. The spark of pain woke her up, made her more alert, and that was good, because she needed to be. "Lucky band, the mark of the damned," she whispered into the darkness that surrounded her. It was simple PM, but if he was out there, if he was trying to find her, it would temporarily smother whatever was drawing him in. From deep within the bowels of the building, the rumbling began. A seismic tremor that shook the entire structure. Megan felt the vibrations through the floor, heard the few items of furniture in the room rattling, shaking their way across the cramped space. She felt crumbs of plaster sprinkling her scalp and smelled dust in the air. It was a cacophony that filled her with terror. Everything was the same. It was exactly like the last time, only this time it was her in the room. The band gave her wrist another snap. The pain was unpleasant, but at least it was familiar. It was something she could control. A horrid metallic shriek, like the sound of rending metal, twisted out of the darkness, setting her nerves on edge. She fearfully glanced at the dark rectangle of the closet door, thankfully closed, and then toward the faint outline of the bed in the corner. She wondered if she should climb onto it, maybe hide beneath its dusty covers, but the black space beneath the bed made her pause. The mental image of pale arms shooting out and grabbing her naked leg as she clambered onto the bed made her shiver. She remained where she was, frozen by indecision. As the shriek died away and the rumbling slowly faded, it was replaced by a high-pitched whine in Megan's ears. She stiffened in alarm. It was the line, she realized, and it was growing louder. That meant trouble. Megan knew the rules as well as any other Murkwater kid. The first was don't go anywhere alone. Well, she was alone now, and she couldn't do anything about that. The door had been locked from the outside. The second rule was don't sleep on the second floor. Megan wasn't worried about that because she had no intention of sleeping, but still, she had been there for hours, at least it felt like hours, which meant it was probably night outside, and here she was. Slowly, a beam of yellow light slid under the door not far from where she was sitting. In a single moment of elation, Megan thought that maybe help had actually come. She quickly swallowed her cry, however, when she heard the kettle's steam hiss behind the door. This grew into a mess of whispering voices, spitting and hissing at each other. It sounded like someone had recorded a nest of snakes and then played that recording backwards. The result made her skin crawl. The beam of light slid over the floor, slowly, deliberately, like a snake crossing a patch of open ground. It moved toward her knee, and Megan was suddenly very sure that she did not want it to touch her. She tried to shuffle herself backwards out of reach, but her muscles felt heavy and wouldn't respond. The edge of the beam stroked the rubber sole of her shoe, and Megan gasped in horror. Then the whispering stopped. All light vanished from the room, and the shadows closed in around the 10-year-old girl. The gloom was so heavy that despite her eyes adjusting, it became difficult to see even the outlines of furniture. She was just stretching the rubber band in her fingers for another snap when Megan became aware that she was not alone in the room. It wasn't something that she could see or hear, but she definitely felt the presence of another. Without warning, the band snapped in two, its loose ends recoiling upward, biting her fingertips. Megan squealed. She dropped the curling rubber to the floor and sucked at her fingers as if they'd been burned. Even as the sting faded from her flesh, she realized that it was no accident. The spell had been broken, and she was now exposed. Somewhere in the shadows in front of her, Megan heard the creak of a door opening. It was not the door that she wanted to open, not the one leading out to the corridor and safety. It was the other door in the room, the closet door. Megan felt her bladder give way, warm shame spreading across her shorts, but she had no time to worry about it. From inside that cramped space came a clicking sound. It sounded like someone playing with one of those metal thumb clickers. The voices of the other children burst inside her head.
Cover your eyes so we cannot see.
She slapped her palms over her eyes, hoping she wasn't too late. A floorboard creaked. There was more clicking. Fast, like the stridulating of a cricket, but now closer, heavier. Then nothing. Megan waited, afraid to take a breath. Still nothing. She knew she should be singing the rhyme, his rhyme, but the idea of making a single noise was crazy. He was already in the room with her. What good would it do now? And then there was the clicking again, and another creak of floorboards. He was moving to her left. Could he see her, she wondered? Surely he would have attacked her if he could see her. She was playing his game, following the rules, but did he have to follow the rules too? She wasn't sure about that. Now she could hear his breathing, a heavy, unsteady rasping. It sounded like someone having an asthma attack. And then there was that damn clicking again. He was circling her. She felt hot breath stroke her hands, and a foul glue smell filled her nostrils. Megan's lungs squeezed shut as if pulled by drawstrings. He was right in front of her face, looking at her. Something hard like a twig gently brushed the fingers covering her right eye. The tip of a claw, maybe?
Cover your hands so we cannot feel.
The children's voice called frantically. Keeping her eyes screwed shut, Megan's hands flew away from her face and buried themselves in her coat pockets. The fingers of her right hand poked against something small, round, and hard. This puzzled Megan, and for a moment she almost forgot the danger she was in as her index finger stroked the surface of the newly discovered object. She felt an indentation, and her rough, bitten fingernails scraped against two tiny holes. Her heart leapt. The button! She'd forgotten that she'd found the button on the kitchen floor that day. Lost buttons were useful. They were strong PM, but she couldn't remember how. The clicking came again, directly in front of her. It was loud and punctuated, so close that Megan could now tell with revulsion that it was no hand-operated toy. It almost sounded like it was part of him, part of his body. Her lip trembled. She had no lucky band to confuse him, no bird bone necklace to repel him. She had only this one tiny thing, this item in her pocket that would either save her or do nothing at all, but she couldn't remember what it did or how to use it. Hot breath blew into Megan's face, and her nerve snapped. Her hand flew out of her pocket. Holding the button between thumb and index finger, keeping her eyes squeezed shut, she thrust it out between herself and her attacker like a shield.
Eye of a demon.
A single child's voice shrieked in her head. Megan's thoughts cleared enough to realize her mistake before her outstretched hand was seized in a crushing grip. She screamed. Once again, the yellow light appeared under Megan's door, paused, then swept away down the corridor, leaving all in darkness. Megan Abbott was no more.